Hi, we're about to start our fifth video. Fifth video covers Etude 2 Part 2. So this is the entire second half of the second etude. It is pretty complex. There's a lot to cover in this etude, more so than the other etudes, because the fast etudes, really, it's just a lot of notes in a row that you have to play fast and make music and get all the right fingerings and play all the right notes. So I'm not diminishing that. I'm just saying with Etude 2, there's a lot more to the counting that we have to cover. There's a more complex fingerings. So we're going to get started on the second half of Etude 2. Starting measure 17, and if you can remember from our previous etudes of covering etude, the first half of this, we're counting the eighth note here. So if you look at this, you see a lot of eighth notes, a lot of 16th notes, and the rhythm in the second half of this is actually quite a bit easier than the second half. So if you're a little intimidated by the first half of Etude 2, you might find starting in the second half is a little bit easier, but you do have some pretty complex things here. So we have this fingering pattern right here that takes us through D, E, and F. And remember, we're not covering trills and turns or grace notes or anything yet. We're going to cover those in the last video. And you have some big leaps here. But the key signature is quite a bit easier. So you have your harder fingering right here, but everything is just a little bit easier. A half note gets 4 counts. An eighth note gets 1 count each. Our quarter notes get 2 counts. Eighth note is 1, 2, 1, 4 beats, 1 beat each for eighth notes. And then you get, starting right here in the middle of 21, you have eighth notes forever. This is just like 1 beat each note. So you have that for like 3.5 measures, playing 1 beat every note. So 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, and it goes on like that. Okay, then we get to measures 26, and 26 looks pretty similar to this. Half note with a quarter note, so their quarter note's going to get 2 beats, a trill and a turn, which we'll cover later. Half note, which remember now is how many beats? 4. And then our quarter notes, how many? Okay, so the rhythm of 26, 27, and 28 are all the same. 4 beats, 2 beats, 4 beats, 2 beats. It sounds like I'm about to do a cheerleading cheer. And 4 beats and 2 beats again. Okay, then as we move into the next line, again, we have quite a few eighth notes all in a row. And we start with the dotted quarter note. So the dotted quarter note is going to get 3 beats. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, count to 6, count to 6. A dotted quarter note again is 3. Eighth notes are 1. We'll cover this trill with a turn later with a grace note. And then starting in measure 33, we have a bunch of 16th notes. So 16th notes, when we count eighth note gets the beat, are like our eighth notes. So just up and downs. We start on an up. So te 4, te 5, te 6, te 1, te 2, te 3, te 4, te. So again, these are just notes all in a row, and you play them on the upbeat and the downbeat. Okay, we have a little bit of counting here, just an eighth note or quarter note A, and that stem is down, so sometimes that can be confusing, but that's just a regular A. And then again, te 4, te 5, te 6, te 1, te 2, te 3, te 4, te 5, te 6, te 1, te, all the way to the end. And then we have a half note when we get to the end. Okay, but you can see these rhythms are all the same, pretty much. bunch of 16th notes here. So the counting of this second half is actually quite a bit easier. Because of that though, when we're going these slower tempos, these quarter notes are going to feel like they take forever to get through. And they're not going to be very fun at these slower tempos. So really the goal of this tempo should really be at least 80. Okay, 80 to 92. You're going to want it to be at least 80. That's going to make your life so much easier. Okay, so we're going to start to go through these measures now and explain each measure. All right, we are at measure 17. Hopefully you're looking at your copy of your music, and you can see at 17 you have a half note, which remember gets 4 counts, 2 eighth notes, which each get 1 beat each, a quarter note, 2 beats. The C eighth note is going to equal 1 beat. The A gets 2 beats, the G gets 1, the F sharp gets 4. This is in measure 19. Okay, then at the end of 19 you have 2 more eighth notes. And in 20 you have quarter note, eighth, and then quarter note, eighth tied over, and then another quarter note in 21 that's a G, and then you have a breath mark. Okay, this is one of those places where I actually think this would be a great place to practice our out and in breathing. So I'm going to plan on breathing out in measure 20 and in 21, and I'll show you what that looks like. And I might not take that breath in measure 18. Okay. Okay, so if I leave out the breath in measure 18, kind of helps to not make that be so choppy. I think they're preparing you to not have a lot of breathing coming up in 23 and 24 and for some of these slower tempos, but that just the breath marks seem a little bit excessive. So I'm going to take advantage of that 1 in 20 to breathe out. I hope you saw that. And if that feels weird, you just have to keep practicing it until you trust that you have the air to make that work. We're so trained to take a nice big breath in before we play, but we actually have quite a bit of control over that and just that whole breathing out issue. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, you need to go back to Etude 2, and that's a second video where I talk about breathing out. That will help you in these slower etudes, just to have some out breaths where we don't have to take an in breath, and that seems really foreign and really weird to just about everybody but oboe players, so that's not so weird. And then when we get into 21, we're playing eighth notes forever. For like 3.5 beats. A slow tempo like that, it's going to seem like it's a long time. So we need to make a lot out of these eighth notes so that they don't get really boring. Okay. Okay, and let's look at 23. So I think that first breath I'm going to use as an out breath. I didn't do that time. But our next breath I want to take in. So your first breath in 23 should be an out breath, and your second breath in measure 23 should be an in breath. So let me show that to you one more time. Okay, and that way, if we take a nice big breath there at the end of 23, we can make it to 26. Okay, So 24 and 25 can be a little challenging, getting to those low Ds and making them speak all the time. You want to make sure that if it's not working, that your oboe is in good adjustment down there. By the time you reach a low D, we have a lot of keys that need to be closed to make that happen. So sometimes, I'm going to show you the back, sometimes we have a little bit of a leak issue with this key. Sometimes when we put the right hand down, we have a little bit of issues with these keys leaking. So those are common areas for school instruments to leak. You want to check those out if it just sounds like you're doing everything right, but it's not quite working. Because at the end of this etude, you also have to do the low Cs repeated. So the other thing you want to watch out for is to make sure that when you're playing your low D, you're not at all thinking about touching this left A flat key. So this is a really sensitive key. If you're even touching it, it's opening. You just can't even lean on it at all. So that's another area, that's another reason that that key might not be working. Okay, so you want to check those two things out if your D is having trouble speaking. So I'm going to play for you going from D to 24 and 25. I'll start the pickup to 24. Okay, I don't know if you can see that or not, but inside of my mouth, I'm thinking, ah, ye, ah, ye, ah, ye. Okay, so that's gonna get you that nice big embouchure for the low D, open, and then more of an E syllable for your high notes. You have to think about placing these high notes or they're gonna sound out of tune, like if you just try and move your finger. That's just flat up there, so you have to think ha yee, ah yee, ah yee. Kind of think like your inside of your mouth is like a slide. And I don't think it actually shows up very much on the outside that I'm doing that on the inside. So let's try it. A little bit. So it's not a huge motion though, and I'm not moving my head at all. I'm not going. That's just kind of weird. And it doesn't help you. So really the work has to be done inside, and if you're staying really straight, you're going to have a little bit of movement here. Okay, so that gives you that idea. Now, when you go down to 37 and 38, you're not going to do that. You're not going to have movement like that because the leaps are a lot less, the interval's a lot less wide. So then we have in 24, 25. So really there you're going to want to stay really steady. Okay, so getting to 26 now, we have a half note which gets 4 beats. Our quarter note gets 2, and 27 and 28 are the same. The only tricky things about there are grace note and the trill, and the grace notes at the end of 28. So we'll cover those later. And when we get to 26, 27, and 28, we just have a pretty simple rhythm under the bass of that. Okay, when we get to 29 is where we have those harder fingerings. So I'm going to show you those into 30. So just 29 is pretty simple. Okay, our D, half hold 2, 3, middle finger pinky. Sometimes I go ahead and put this key down. It depends on if your oboe can do it or not. It makes the switch to E a little bit easier. So from D, you want to be sure that you're half hold 2, 3, 2, 3, and you switch to A flat and E flat. Remember, we're going to put down our finger right here. So we hit those keys down together. Okay? So hit them down together, and then E in the bottom, in the top space E, that's a back octave key note. That's where our back octave key goes back on for our high notes. So E and F are both back octave key notes. And once you have the E fingering, F is easy, okay? Especially in this situation, going from E to F is pretty easy. The E, getting from D to E is most challenging, but if you think it grouped into different, just D to E and then E to F. Don't try and lump them all together. So D, and then E, you're going to go to your top hand goes to back octave, A flat, E flat, and then you go to 2 and 3 down here. Okay, so D, E, and then E to F. I told you it's really easy. You just pick up your ring finger on your left hand. Okay, your third finger. So E to F, E to F, and try not to have it locked out like that. So E to F, okay? Okay, and you just saw me like pick up that little one for F. There's a crescendo there anyway at the top of that crescendo, so it helps you have those notes come out a little bit easier if you're using the correct amount of air for them. Okay, so let me just play 29 to the downbeat of 32. All of these, once you count your dotted quarter note, again, you're in all eighth notes, so each note is getting 1 count each. So a couple issues with that section, 29 to 30, downbeat to 32. You want to be sure that you follow the slur all the way. I found I was really tempted to want to tongue, especially the high D. I don't know why. It's C to D, and we just have to do it a lot to get more comfortable doing it. So be sure that you don't slur into the D. Then after your high F, make sure that when you go to your C sharp, so your F, then you've gone from your E to F, make sure your C sharp is only inside outside. Okay, so that's a challenge going from your high F to your C sharp. Then make sure your half hole is back down for D, and then the rest of it takes care of itself. You want to be sure and tongue the downbeat of 31. Okay, but those were some issues that I had when I was practicing this, that I wanted to put articulations in because I wanted to make sure the note came out, but you just need to practice it enough that you know the note's going to come out and be fine. Okay, then in 32 we have our dotted quarter note again, so 3 beats, 3 eighth notes with a trill on the first eighth note, which we'll get to later, and then the downbeat of 32 is a quarter note. So when we get to the middle of 32 now, or 33, we have eighth notes. They're really 16th notes, but we're going to play them like they're eighth notes, so they just get downs and ups. Up, down, up, down, up, down, up. Also, we want to be really careful that we follow the slurs here as well. So I'll play to the downbeat of 37 for you. Okay, so we can lean on some notes, we can put vibrato on some notes, we can do things to make those not just be boring notes. So here's 35 and 36, just kind of boring and straightforward and getting right notes, but it's really not very musical. So do you see my point? It's just not very interesting. So here's that again with a little bit more interest, a little bit of vibrato on certain notes, and leaning on our note at the top of the crescendo in 36. And those are pretty fast notes, but I'm using vibrato on some of those notes. We need to use vibrato on some of our shorter notes just to give our notes some color, and to help emphasize the right notes. Okay? Then 37 to the end. This is where we have all these low C's. If you look at the top notes though, we have F, A, C, A, F, A, F, A, C, A, F, A, F. Okay? So, except for going to the low C's, the notes on the top aren't that hard. They're part of our FAC arpeggio, and we can just think about the fact that we're playing an arpeggio but not be terribly concerned about these top notes. Then be sure on the bottom note on this low C that you're not leaning on this key again. That was what we covered in 24 and 25, so you want to be sure that you're not leaning there. Also, these dynamics can be a little bit intimidating because in 37 you have piano, and then in 38 you have a double piano, and you're like, those are low C's, and that's impossible. And it does seem impossible sometimes to play our low C's quietly. So we have to play these notes so that they sound good no matter what. And if it needs to be a little bit louder in order for the note to speak, then it just has to be a little bit louder. So don't be concerned about that. Just when you're first practicing them, just do them. Don't worry about making dynamics, and don't worry about getting softer. Don't worry about that until you kind of have the pattern down. And then you do this enough so that you can figure out how quietly you can play those low C's and still have them speak. Okay, and remember, this is the end of your etude, so you'll be pretty exhausted. Breathing has not been very nice to us in this etude. We have lots of long passages with long spaces between them. So we're gonna just do the last two measures, the last three measures, as quiet as we can, and be happy with that. Okay, so here are the last three measures. I took a little bit of time before the very second to last note, the last C. That just makes it feel like it's kind of the end of a piece instead of just finishing and not having any kind of musical intent behind it. So another thing that we want to be careful of is that we don't over exaggerate the C trying to get the C. So we don't want this either. See, I'm just really honking out those low C's, and it's not very pretty. So try and keep everything super still. No movement here. Everything is just like you're like a robot going back and forth to these low C's. So. On the second note, this is something that I think when I'm playing these second to last notes and I'm trying to give them just a little bit of time, I think 5, 6, I'm done. instead of ta-da, 5, taste 6, ta-da, and you do it too fast. So ba-da-da, I am done. And that concludes this video. I'll be playing some of these at different tempos, one at 70, one at 80. This is eighth note equals 70. This is eighth note equals 80.